Now, broadly speaking, what are some of the things that can influence IQ? Well, what we find is that age is a determinant, nutrition, levels of education, obviously. There's no point in someone having a very high IQ if they're in a country that doesn't have schools and people can't read and write. So while these figures can change a little bit, it can go up slightly, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to get someone and suddenly turn them into Albert Einstein, yeah, just through giving them all these things. It changes, but only like very, very slightly in real terms. In terms of the eugenicist movement as well, it also looked into different races. So many people in the alt-right, for instance, yeah, will talk about IQ tests, yeah, and talk about how certain races score higher or lower, and therefore we shouldn't have migration coming from low IQ countries. The problem with this is that, first of all, it's obviously very racist. Second of all, it's not even really based in any sort of science at all. There's a global spectrum. So if we look at like countries around the world with different IQ levels, we can see that in some countries, it is much higher, right? So in places like the Far East, in places like China, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, I believe, like Taiwan, in these kind of places, like Japan, they're very, very high levels of IQ. In Europe, Britain and Italy have very high IQs. And so as you kind of go around the world, you start to see more and more like this, right? And then in certain countries in Africa, in certain countries in the Middle East, like I believe Afghanistan from the top of my head, and many other places, yeah, where you have very low levels of literacy and very low levels of education and stuff, yeah. People have you have very low average IQs in all these countries. The question is that determinist? Yeah, like, is that a thing of like people are just born that way? Like different races are inherently born like with a higher IQ or low IQ than others? Actually, no. It's largely environmental factors. It's largely like other things that go into it. Just give an illustration of this. Nigerians in the UK have 5% higher IQ level than the average white British person in the UK. So if it's just to do with race, surely then we would see these figures like translate in other things. So for instance, income has a 25% variation. So it's not the biggest impact on levels of IQ, but it still is quite significant. Talk about the US, poor African Americans have an average IQ of 80. If you look at rich African Americans, it's 105. Which actually puts them on par with the average Asian population. If you look at it just as a mean, right, you say, well, the IQ, the average IQ for African Americans is 85. But that ignores the fact that actually a lot of black people in America are very poor, have very low levels of education, and so this might explain some of the things, because as soon as black people have the same opportunities, like kind of in terms of socioeconomic terms, their IQ is actually higher than the national average. So it really does like seem to indicate that actually IQ is influenced by many other things. It's not a one size fits all. It's not like let's make everyone richer or let's make everyone more equal, let's make etc, and then everyone's going to become geniuses. It's not saying that at all. But a big part of the disparity, big part of why you're seeing certain countries in the world with lower IQs, and therefore the immigrants of those countries coming to whatever country with lower IQs, that's just a reflection on how bad their education system is back in their home country. It's not a reflection on how innately intelligent the people there are. How important is IQ? In the words of L. Hunt, it's important to have enough, but having lots and lots does not buy you that much. In other words, it's a thing of IQ is useful to an extent as a general kind of indicator, but it's not like the be all and end all, right? If you have a low IQ, it doesn't mean you can't be a very intelligent, very functioning member of society. It just means that for certain things, especially in the realm of academics, you will not necessarily succeed as well as some of your other peers might, right? That's literally it. It's like, for instance, you've got an engine that's really, really powerful, and then you've got another engine which is like medium, like strength, right? It's a thing of both of them will still get you from A to B, but just one of them will get there quicker. So one person will be able to do maths, for instance, much quicker than someone else. Someone will be able to see patterns and do word puzzles, etc., quicker than other people, which give them an advantage, but it's not so much of an advantage that people can't do anything. Although there is also a thing where having a high IQ does put you ahead, like socioeconomically. So for instance, hopefully I've found like these stats again, yeah, like kind of, and hopefully they're on screen now. So what's quite interesting actually is that in the post-war period where you had high levels of taxes and regulation, etc., you tend to find that actually people with very high IQs tended to be a lot more equal to other people and stuff, right? In terms of the inequality. Then what you found from like the 1980s onwards, when you had the lowering of the tax rate and like deregulation and Reaganomics, like Thatcherism, etc., what you actually tended to find is that people who had very high IQs suddenly just went boom, and this coincided as well with the information age, with the rise of the internet and stuff, because all the kind of really smart nerds, all the like technicians, all the kind of computer programmers, etc., people who obviously need very high levels of IQ. These are the people who suddenly shot up like and ended up becoming fabulously wealthy, while the rest of us people were just left like, oh, I don't understand how any of this works. Like, for me, if I have technical problems on my computer, like, I've got to call up a mate, I don't know nothing about it. So even with an IQ on paper as big as mine, I can't do many things. I'm not as intelligent as my IQ test might imply. As anyone who's watched this channel knows, like, yes, clearly I am not that intelligent. I might be in some areas, but if you look at all the gaffes that we have, yes, not that bright. But I'll tell you what's not that bright. People sat here watching this channel and you've not left a like, you've not left a comment, you ain't even subscribed. What are you doing? The quickest way to test that you're a big brain like me, yeah, is to do all those things. And also share with your friends, if you have any. I trust that you must have some friends. So share the love. Share these videos with people, yeah? I'll keep the plug really like quick this time, yeah, because just some people, their cognitive abilities are they small brain compared to some people, yeah. So I'll speak it in very simple terms: likey, subscribey, commenty, and sharey. Hey, good people. Hey, big brain now. Hey. So what we might ask as well is, what is the relationship between IQ and crime? So what we find is that the average criminal has an IQ between 80 and 90. So if we think about the average being 100, they're slightly below average, but higher than some of the lower functioning people yet. Because obviously to be able to commit certain crimes, it does require a certain level of intelligence. Yeah, it takes a little bit of like forward thinking, etc., etc. At the same time, obviously not probably enough IQ to necessarily recognize long-term consequences to their actions, and also being able to do the maths and be like, well, I could do this for short-term gain, but I could defer that gratification and go through more like legal routes, and that would be a better use of my time. Like if we think about people with IQs of 80 to 90, as we discussed before, these are people who are on the level of elementary school dropout. If you're at a level of either a primary school kid or you've not even made it to the end of primary school, what are your life chances? Like, what are your options in life? It's going to be very difficult for you to be able to actually go on and do anything else in life. It's bad enough not being able to get like GCSEs or the US equivalent or whatever, right? But for you to not even pass primary school / elementary school, that's quite embarrassing. That's like wow. Like imagine trying to apply for a job with that as your highest qualification, and even that's like, oh soz, you didn't even pass that. What else are you going to do? Of course you're going to end up in a life of crime. It's going to be the only way that you're going to have a real chance of making money, unless you want to go back to school and like educate yourself, which would be the smart thing to do long term. But oftentimes people will just be led astray, and like that's how we end up with so many criminals, like kind of in that kind of level of IQ distribution thing, right? Because people with a certain level of IQ, if they do enter these crime syndicates, yeah, they end up rising very quickly to the top. They end up being the bosses, yeah, they end up being like the big dons and stuff. The people who make up the vast majority of the thing are like, relatively speaking, below average IQ level people, and unless they're particularly like ruthless, they're not going to rise to the top of these syndicates and if they do, certainly not for any amount of time, because someone more intelligent than them, more cunning than them, is going to end up like outdoing them. If basically what I'm saying is, if you struggle to pass primary school or secondary school or whatever, go back to school, do online courses, get an education, yeah, like and get some qualification under your belt, and then go out into the normal world, yeah, because crime doesn't pay, and certainly not if you're a criminal with low IQ. All you're gonna do is keep doing silly crimes and getting caught and put back in jail, and that's just gonna be your life. See, on this channel we do give some useful advice every now and again. But anyway, now we've dealt with eugenics and race and crime and income. Now we're going to talk about something we can all come together on, which is who's smarter, men or women? Now, before you bite my head off, just hear me out. Just hear me out. I'm not taking any sides. I'm just reading out the data we have here. Just leave me alone, please. So, men and women are equal. But what's interesting is that men tend to be better with objects and women tend to do better with words. So in the IQ test, as we said, it's made up of multiple different parts. And what we tend to find is that men, on average, tend to do better with these things and women tend to do better with those things, right? So on average, when you put all the different data together, it does tend to be average. However, with men, what we see with IQ, we see across the board in many different like fields and stuff. Men tend to be on the extremes of both ends of it. So people with very, very low IQ tend to be men, and people with very, very high IQ tend to be men as well. Same thing when we think about crime. People who are the victims of crime, in many cases, tend to be men, in terms of like, well, violent crime anyway. And most of the perpetrators of violent crime are men. And you see this with like income, you see this with many different like things in life, right? Some of the richest, most of the richest people are men, and also the poorest people are men as well, right? So when we think about it as a whole, we see men being the outliers on both sides of that distribution. But it's a thing of taken as a whole, the average is still basically the same as whether it be men or women. So that's the conclusive thing. It's a fact of men and women are equal, but men are more equal than... No, I don't want to say that joke. Never mind. So now we're going to get on to more stable ground, looking at sibling rivalry. If you've got a younger brother or sister, I just want you to go to them and say, haha, I'm smarter than you, haha, I'm smarter than you. Because statistically speaking, with each sibling that goes down, someone's IQ drops by 1.5 points, which in the grand scheme of things, not like the most. Like if you've got an IQ of 110 and someone's got an IQ of 108.5, it's not the deepest thing, like you're not really going to notice and stuff, but at least statistically speaking, on average, yeah, that does tend to be the case, whereby with each child that goes by, the level of IQ tends to go down, 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 which we don't really know why at this moment. Maybe it's because when the mum and dad like had the first child, they put a lot more care and attention into it, and then with the second one, they kind of go, oh, okay, cool, I've got to take care of both these ones. Maybe, perhaps it's something to do with that, I'm not sure. And you tend to find also that identical twins have very similar levels of IQ with each other, but not the same, right? So an identical twin who was raised with the other twin, they have similar IQs to about 85%, right? So about 85% similar to the one that they grew up with. However, if you take that identical twin and have them raised by someone else, right, and then they meet each other, just do this test, right, you tend to find that 75% of their IQ is similar. So it's within a 75% margin. So what you tend to find with fraternal twins, so people who are not twins who are not identical looking, but like, you know, they still happen to just be twins. If they're of the same gender, then they are 55% of their IQ similar to one another. Whereas if they are, one's a boy and one's a girl, then it tends to be 50%. Now, when we start getting onto just siblings in general, we tend to find a 42% similarity if they were raised together, and you find a 21% similarity if they were raised apart. So if you find someone who's like your long lost like brother or sister or whatever, chances are you're gonna, because you've lived such different lives, you do have two parents in common, but there's so much that separates you both genetically and in terms of distance and upbringing and stuff, yeah, that, yeah, 21% similarity. And then when we compare this to parents, yeah, if they're your actual biological parents, then you have a 40% similarity with their IQ, compared to just 20% if they're foster parents. So actually, there's very little relation with all these different like kind of relatives here. So even people who are identical twins, it still is a certain level of variation. So what's quite strange is something as random as you're an identical twin and you came out slightly before your other one. Yeah? That means that you will have a different IQ than them. So you're pretty much exactly the same. The only thing separating you is a tiny little bit, but somehow you will end up being very different. So it's very, very strange in terms of IQ, in terms of it literally is just the luck of the draw, really. Yeah, you could have someone who's got a really high IQ and someone with a really low IQ in the same family. As we can see, there's a certain level of similarity, but if even like one's own parents and oneself, if there's such a difference, we can really see like how it really is just pot luck, really. Hopefully now you know a little bit more about IQ. Don't start bragging to people about you've got a IQ that's higher than them, because IQ, while it is important in some regards, it's much more important for you to be a decent human being, for you to be a kind human being, for you to be considerate, for you to be emotionally intelligent, and for you to be in tune with yourself and with those who are around you, right? Because all intelligence in the world doesn't make you a better person, and having a low IQ does not mean that you're any less valuable than someone else.